Okay, great. Yeah. So where are you? You are in Moscow now?
I am. I'm an election observer, so I'll be here until the 18th.
Oh, oh, okay. That's why you don't come back right away. What
Yeah.
election? The presidential election?
Yep.
Wow, you will be observe the election. Okay. We need to talk to you more. Okay. Well,
Sure.
yeah. Well, today we mainly will want to talk the youth festival. Okay. Can you first tell us a little bit of history and about this festival? I think my viewers probably not very familiar with it.
Sure. Well, the first one was held in 1947 in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. And then they had them every 4 years. And it was an attempt by the Soviet Union and China and the communist countries of the world to bring together young people from all over the world to build kind of a movement opposing fascism and unifying young people of different races and religions and ethnic backgrounds in the hopes that something like World War II would never happen again. And they actually wrote a pledge that we use in CPI. We just replaced youth with people, and we made it the Center for Political Innovation pledge. And these festivals were held every 4 years, usually in a communist country. But there would be young people from every country in the world who were invited, and they would bring thousands and thousands of people. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, they stopped doing them for a while. But then the Cubans relaunched them in the 90s. And they've been doing them since then. I went to two of these festivals. These were called the World Festival of Youth and Students. I went to the first one I ever went to was in Quito, Ecuador in 2013. And then I went to the one that was here in Russia in 2017. And so at 2017, the World Youth Festival that they had, it was the official like communist one. There's an association created at the United Nations called the World Federation of Democratic Youth, and there's something called the International Union of Students, and the two UN organizations sponsor the festival every 4 years. And so the one in 2017 was the official United Nations Youth Festival, but the Russian government kind of changed it a little bit because there's a lot of nostalgia in Russia for those festivals. Because a lot of Russian people during the time of the Soviet Union, that was their only opportunity to meet young people from other countries and such. And so there's a lot of nostalgia. So in 2017, Putin kind of took the regular UN World Youth Festival and he made it much more broad and inclusive. And he let the communists kind of do their thing in one section, but then he focused on technology and industrialization, railway, aviation. He made it so there were a lot more spots for Russian young people, and it was kind of competitive, and it was like the highest achieving. And he kind of took it in a different direction. So, since the war in Ukraine started, many of the organizations that are part of the World Democratic Youth Federation and the International Union of Students, they don't support Russia in Ukraine. They've taken a bad position. So based on the tradition of the World Festival of Youth and Students, Putin launched his own World Youth Festival. So it's called World Youth Festival, and this is the first one. And it's kind of it's like an updated version of the World Festival of Youth and Students. And it was attended by 20,000 young people from 136 different countries. And I was the chair of the US delegation. And it was an utterly amazing event. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I mean, it was really, really amazing. And I had so many meetings with people from many different parts of Russia, as well as from many different countries in the world. And the focus was on, development and peace and breaking down international barriers and getting to know people of different cultures, and also on opposing imperialism and opposing the attempts by the United States to create, barriers to trade and economic development. While I very much support what Russia is doing in Ukraine, I think it's the right move. But I noticed that our guides really didn't want us to talk about that. They wanted instead to just focus on trade and development and friendship. There was a beautiful display in the main building of the festival about NATO and its history. I made a video of that, and they did talk about Russia's history and especially the history of the Second World War. But at the same time, they didn't really want the festival to be a big, rally against America. They wanted it to be very much an inclusive event where people of different political perspectives, different religions, et cetera, could come together. One thing is because there's so many Muslim countries here, drinking, alcohol is a really big part of Russian culture. People love to drink their vodka, et cetera. But because there were so many Muslim countries here, they actually banned alcohol in the city of Sochi the entire time of the festival to make sure that all these young people coming from other countries weren't drinking alcohol. I thought that was very sweet. And there were a lot of efforts like that to accommodate people from different countries and different backgrounds. It was really, really great. And I will say they have a team of thousands of young Russian people who are like volunteers. Most of them are like high school, maybe early college age students who put on the festival, who worked really, really hard. I mean, these kids didn't sleep the whole time, and they were there accommodating us and making sure everyone had what they needed. It was really, really great.
Yeah, I checked on their website. So this is what they said. Okay, in the front page, it says the World Youth Festival is the largest youth event in the world that will be held by the decree of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So he's the host, I guess. And then it says the festival will host 20,000 young Russian and foreign leaders in such fields as business, media, international cooperation, culture, science, education, volunteering, and charity, sports, and various areas of public life. Teenagers representing children's organizations and associations will join the festival as well. So it sounds very broad, right? So all kinds of the things that's going on there. Sounds very exciting.
Yeah, they had children this year, and by children they just mean teenagers, people under the age of 18. And they had a special section, so I didn't interact with them. They were at a special section where I think they did a little more. They did a little more, youth oriented stuff. They took them to like an amusement park and things like that, but they didn't do that at previous festivals. So that was one of their great breakthroughs, is they had like teenagers here as well, from different countries. And on the last day of the festival, the Russian president came to the festival and he gave an amazing speech, which at the end, he called for communism, which I thought was amazing. He said that we seek to create a world where there's equal opportunity for development for all, where none are without and there is no poverty. And he said, I don't know if we'll be able to achieve that or not, but working for it will make all of our lives meaningful and beautiful. It was a really great speech. And before he gave the speech, they had a special ceremony where people held up the pictures of their ancestors who fought in World War II. And, the lights were out and there were so many pictures of the Red Army and the fight against fascism and such. And then he came out and gave this speech that ended with a call for building a classless, stateless world of vast material abundance, saying he didn't know if we could get there or not. But working for it would make our lives meaningful and such. I thought that was really, really powerful. And the other thing that he said in his speech, which is very interesting, because it's you have to listen to these things because not everything is as they say. He said that we're all united from different races, different religions, different nations. We're all united by our belief in traditional values. Now, when we in America, we hear traditional values, we think, opposing LGBT, opposing gay marriage, et cetera. But then he went on to say what traditional values are. And he said traditional values are wanting people to have education, wanting people to have healthcare, wanting people to have jobs, loving your children, wanting, basically he was saying traditional values are love for humanity, love for each other, human solidarity. So by saying traditional values, that might have been seen as kind of a conservative thing. But then when he went on to define it, it was almost like a socialist kind of thing. I thought that was very interesting. And of course, you have to listen for this kind of nuance when you hear world leaders speak, because things mean different things in different contexts.
Yeah, traditional values is very interesting because I think maybe the right, the conservative in the United States will be surprised to find out the traditional values that they think is very important. Very similar to the socialist values, actually.
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree that like the value you're talking about, what Putin was saying, that's very important in China. Families, it's so important. There's a saying in Chinese, it's called 家和万事兴, which means that when families doing well, all the problems solved. You see, I would say probably that's very much in line with the deeply conservative people. That's probably what they believe too, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, we have to learn to understand things outside of the Western context. And that's kind of I see this all throughout, Western society. I mean, a great example is the Tiananmen stuff, right? That whole situation was
Yeah.
very complicated, but people look at it and they immediately think of the hippies, and Kent State, and they think of there's a what is it? There's a movie where Sylvester Stallone, I think he's Rambo, and he's mad about the hippies protesting. He says, "I want to kill them all, these maggots," or something. And that's what they think China did. They think the protesters are hippies, which they were not, and then
Mhm.
they think the Chinese government is Sylvester Stallone who wants to kill all the hippies, and that's not what happened, right? But we're projecting our own culture, our own experience onto something that happened in China. And that's a mistake that Americans make. They try to interpret every world event and the rhetoric and policies of every country as if it's like part of their own political understanding. It's not, right? Left and right don't mean the same things, internationally as they mean in the United States. And so I would urge people to try and think outside of the narrow framework of Western politics, because it just doesn't apply when you're interacting with countries around the world.
I think a communist and probably lesser degree socialist has been demonized so much. So lots of the conservative people don't seems even interested in knowing more about communist, about socialist, the traditional left, I would call them, not the synthetic left that you call them, right? The right now the left of the Democrat Party right now in the US, they are the synthetic left, but they're not really the left. They're very much the same people as the right. I mean, there is not that synthetic, that authentic right either. I think the traditional left and right has gone. They have all become a uni party, and the real conservatives are not really the right either. I think on both sides that we have to redefine them, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Well, what we think of as left in the West started with the French Revolution. After they overthrew the king, the people that were more sympathetic to the king, they formed a national assembly, and the people that were more sympathetic to the king, they sat on the right, and the people that were very excited about the revolution sat on the left. And so left just kind of became associated with people that were excited about revolution. It was an aesthetic, right? It was, rebellion, tearing down authority, questioning people in power. And that communism and Marxism started out as part of that current. It was people from the French Revolution and that tradition who saw that capitalism did not create an egalitarian society, and that maybe there needed to be a step to go further. But Lenin, he had the understanding of imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism, and he took Marxism out of Europe and argued that socialism would come into the world from the East rather than from the West. And then Stalin took it a little bit further and innovated and pioneered the creation of a socialist state. And then Deng Xiaoping with socialism with Chinese characteristics. And now I would argue that socialism is no longer really connected to the left in the West. And the left in the West has completely forgotten all of Marx's economic teachings, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. All of this has kind of been forgotten. The left just kind of focuses on some people have more money than others. That's unfair. Some people are privileged and others are not. That's unfair. And we're really, really angry and we want to punish people and tear things down. And it's just a continuation of that revolutionary aesthetic without any of the economics of Marxism and socialism, which I will add is very important, right? I've been talking to people. I talked to people from Iran at the festival. I talked to people from Yemen. I talked to people from many African countries. They're all talking about that. I talked to people from China, from Vietnam. They're all talking about Marxist economics. They're not so much interested in the aesthetic of being left, right? And they're definitely not interested in the LGBT thing. They just kind of roll their eyes. They're not concerned about that. There's a real difference there. It's like, you can take something from Marx, and some people take the dialectical philosophy and the spiritual atmosphere of rebellion, and other people take the hard economic analysis that he developed. And I think that the hard economic analysis is alive in China and in the anti-imperialist countries, and the spiritual dialectical spirit of rebellion is really all the Western left is held on to. So it's kind of weird. Mao Zedong, he said, one must always divide into two. And I would argue Marx has divided into two.
Yeah. Now, are there big media presence? Because actually, quite a few of my viewers, they said they saw you on the Chinese media. So somebody, I
Wow.
guess, yeah, quite a few of them, they said, "Oh, we saw him. He was on your show." So they recognize you because you were on my show.
Oh, okay.
I'm very glad that there are quite a few of my viewers in their comments when I was doing a live stream. They were telling me that, so I find that's
What
interesting.
did
So
they
there
see
were
me
a lot
doing?
of they saw you. Somebody, I guess the CCTV has present there, so they were filming around, and you were talking to some other media people or something.
Okay.
So they saw you being interviewed, but they didn't
Okay.
see you are interviewed by the CCTV or something.
Okay.
So
I've
that's,
given a million interviews. So, I
yeah,
mean, it's like I could barely go 2 seconds without being interviewed. Like every time I turned around, someone wanted to interview me for
it,
something. So,
it
yeah.
could be it could be they interviewed you. You don't even know it. It could be, but I didn't get the details. They just saying they saw you. Quite a few of them say, "Oh, we saw Mo
Well,
Ping," which is your Chinese name. Yeah.
I will say I did get to meet the representative of the All China Youth Federation, Li
Oh, okay.
Ragu. She is really cool. She asked the first question at the session I went to with the Russian president. She's very cool, very exciting. Her English is amazing, by the way, real command of English as well as Chinese, and she was very cool to talk to. And she was there representing the All China Youth Federation, and also she's like a journalist for their magazine, the magazine of the All China Youth Federation. So that was pretty
Oh,
cool.
okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to ask you about the question because the Center for Political Innovation was there, pretty active, asking the question. Is that what the Putin was talking about at the end? So he came, and then you guys could ask the questions.
So yeah, so he came and he spoke. He gave a speech at the closing ceremony, and that was just to the whole festival. He gave a speech, right? And the ceremony it was like the opening ceremony of the Olympics. I mean, just these elaborate shows with music and lights and acrobats and all of this. And then the close of the opening ceremony, the Russian president gave a speech, and then he was taken to a very special room. They call the Atom Hall, right? I don't know why it's called that, but it's called the Atom Hall, where there were 300 of us that had been selected for a special meeting with the Russian president. And I was there, and I got to ask him a question on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation. And so did Noah. Noah Shank is a member of our organization. He also got to ask a question on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation. So we got 2 questions from the Russian president. And this was not random. There was a lot of screening in the lead up to it. So that kind of shows you how trusted we are by the Russian government, that we were able to not only get into the same room as the president, but actually 2 questions from our organization were fielded to the Russian president. And I'm really honored by that. And if you get a chance to watch the whole session with the Russian president, for 2 hours, he engaged with young people. First question was from Li Rongu of the All China Youth Federation. Then there was a young guy from Belgium who asked a question. Then I asked my question. It was a really, really great session. There was a young guy from Uganda who said to the president, Putin, he said, "Can I be your son? And can you mentor me?" And everyone in the room kind of laughed, and he said, "Okay, Sonny," and responded that way. And he said, "But you're the president of the Student Association of Uganda, so I'll call you Mr. President." And everyone laughed about that afterwards. So, and then he invited the young man onto the stage to take a photograph with him at the end of the meeting. It was very, very sweet. And the other thing that I thought was neat, so I asked my question, and he gave an answer, which, we were like making eye contact. I was like listening very intently. So then when Noah from CPI also asked a question, as he was asking the question, the Russian president turned over and looked at me like, "Oh, there's 2 of you here, aren't there?" It was amazing. It was like this. He has a funny way of being. You just have to be in the room with him. This is the 3rd time I've ever been in the same room as the Russian president. This is the first time I actually got to interact with him. There's something about him. He has this kind of subtle humor, this way of being. There's something about him. It's hard to explain. You just have to be there. You have to understand him. He has a very special charm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yes, he's very charismatic in a lot of ways. And that's why that's why the West hate him.
Yeah.
Right. It would be so much easy if he just downright evil, serious all the time, looks very scary, but he's not like that.
Not at
So,
all.
yeah. So other than this closing and opening ceremony, what are the activities you're doing? Are there just you're freely to mingle with each other all the time, or are there some schedules,
There were like
events?
hundreds of different workshops that they did,
Okay.
all kinds of different topics. I was actually invited to speak on a workshop about youth in a multipolar world. And then I couldn't actually speak at it because I had to go to the screening to meet the president. So a member of our organization named Tom Mitchlack, he like kind of impromptu had to give the speech, and he gave a great speech about optimism. And he spoke at that panel, and there were a number of different countries on this panel about youth in a multipolar world, including North Korea. So North Korea and the United States were on the same panel, and then afterwards, Tom was able to talk to the North Koreans, and we published a book for the festival about our desire to build for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula that was widely distributed and very well received. That was pretty neat. The former foreign minister of Austria was here, and she gave a workshop about economics. And she apparently runs a center for economic studies here in Russia. She had moved to Lebanon, and then all of her bank accounts in Austria were shut down and all of that. So she had to flee to Russia. And she runs an institute for the study of economics in Russia. And she gave a great workshop, which I filmed a lot of. I'm going to put on YouTube when I get back. That was pretty exciting. There were a lot of activities. They also had opportunities to take people up into the mountains near Sochi to see the mountains. There were a lot of things. We met with a sister city, Novograd in Russia was the sister city of America. And so we met with a special delegation from Novograd. They taught us a traditional Russian dance. That was very exciting. They did a lot of different activities. I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to have to process this as I get home. Peter Coffin is going to edit together for us a very good video showing all that we did, because there were so many things that we filmed and so many interactions that we had. So
that's another thing interesting, because in the past, it's like the people in China, in Russia, if they are persecuted in their own country, they fled to the West. Now it seems multiple people from the West now flying to, to flee to Russia, right, to get protected there. I mean, that's
a lot. I've been meeting them. I didn't even realize how many. I knew Tara Reid, my friend, she had fled to Russia because, of the Biden administration going after her. And I knew there were a couple others, but there's a lot more. I'm now in Moscow, and I met just in my hotel lobby a number of people who live in Moscow now because they've had to flee. One of them is a journalist who was at January 6th, and he was just there covering it as a journalist. And he fled the country because he figured he was going to be prosecuted for it. And he's here because he knows if he goes home, they'll charge him for being inside the Capitol because he was trying to report on what happened. There's a number of different people that have fled to Russia. People that have been accused of stuff with blockchain and crypto, and all kinds of people have fled to Russia. There's a huge exile community in Moscow and in other parts of Russia.
Isn't that interesting? It used to be the opposite, right? It used to be the Soviet, right? That you hear them fled to the West. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's the second question before my question. I was the third question, was a doctor from Belgium, and this doctor asked his question. And now I've been talking to other people from Belgium that are with me. It was all over Belgian media that he asked this question. He's now going to lose his job as a doctor because he asked Putin a question. And so he doesn't know what he's going to do. And he's a well-respected doctor from Belgium. And it looks like he's going to be fired from his job just because he asked the Russian president a question. I mean, it's insane. The freedom that the West supposedly has is not there. I gave a press conference at the United Nations before I left because of what happened to the Uhuru movement and their indictment by the American government, because they went to a conference in Russia. Some of the other people from our delegation have gone back to the United States already, and they didn't have any problems at the border. So I'm hoping that everything is all right. But, I can tell that they really didn't want us to go to this conference. I can tell you that much. So.
Well, they openly, for people who they're students from Ivy Leagues protesting against the Gaza situation, they are right against the Israeli attack on the Gaza civilians. They are openly bankers and influential people who are saying, we don't want these people to find jobs. They put their names and everywhere to basically just cancel these students, right? Because they protested that for what is happening.
And they want to put Tucker Carlson in jail because he interviewed the Russian president. I mean, it's insane. I mean, the West is not as free as it proclaims to be. What's different, I think, is that, Russia, China, these countries admit that to some degree or other, because of their circumstances, they have to restrict these things. But America says, no, we're just the land of freedom. We're open and all of that. And yet they engage in this kind of activity. And so it's much more frustrating. If there was an honest conversation about what the rules are, et cetera, people would be I think more willing to accept this. But the hypocrisy is what really gets to people.
Russia and China are constantly under attack from the US. Like media, They have, like in China, there's endless NGOs. Many of them, they are not really, legitimate NGOs doing charity works. They are covert connections with the NED, with the CIA. They're constantly trying to overthrow their governments. Whereas China, Russian don't do that. They don't come here to the United States trying to covertly overthrow the government, despite what they're saying about Russiagate. That's just not true, right? So in some sense, if the West, the United States in particular, if they leave China and Russia alone, China and Russia probably will be even more free. You know what I mean? That they would be more relaxed in these kind of ways, both in terms of censorship and organization, all that freedom. I think to a certain degree, actually, pretty big part of it is because they constantly under attack from the US and the West.
Exactly.
I think, yeah. So lots of people don't understand. They think, okay, why do you censor your people? Well, if they don't, I mean, this is some kind of a sovereignty and, independence and protection for them, so.
Yeah, that's why the Center for Political Innovation, we don't endorse anyone in elections. We do not campaign for any candidate. We have to be very careful because we're not trying to meddle in American politics. We're just trying to teach an ideology and an understanding of 21st century socialism and anti-imperialism. We're an educational organization. We're not involved in the American political process. And that's a really important thing to emphasize.
Yeah, and that's also, I personally think that part of the reason China doesn't comfortable have general election. You know how election they can do. If you have a massive amount of outsiders and money coming in, etc. You don't know what will happen. So they would instill somebody that they like a Zelensky kind of character. It will be disasters. And you talk about.
I mean, and this is an important point too. When I went to Iran, I remember one of the conversations that was very educational for me was in Iran. They have this thing called the Guardian Council, which is a group of leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Movement and such. And they, when people run for office, they approve or disapprove of the candidates. And that's not democratic, right? They have these religious leaders that guide their democracy. And I was talking with an Iranian cleric, and he said, you have the same thing in America. It's called Wall Street. It's called big money. And they decide who gets to be a legitimate candidate and who doesn't. Because just like Iran, America is not purely democratic, right? But the difference is that in Iran, the people that are guiding the democracy are the leaders of the revolution, the people who have a vision for developing the country, the people who broke the country free from Western imperialism. Whereas in America, the people who guide your democracy are whoever happens to have the most money. Now, if you're going to have a guided democracy, doesn't it make sense to have it guided by people that have a project and are committed to certain principles, et cetera, rather than just whoever happens to have the most money? And that makes sense, right? And until we have full communism in the world, there won't be pure democracy, right? There's going to be some people that are the ruling class to some degree or other. So isn't it better to have a ruling class that is, and I shouldn't say a ruling class, but a group of ruling people or a governing entity that is carrying out a project, that has led a revolution, that is trying to lead the country in a certain direction, than just have it be people that just want to make lots of money and already have lots of it and are going to manipulate things to serve their own ends. And I think that's an important point to make. There's a very important book that Lenin wrote called Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. Awful name, very obscure. But what it's about is after the Bolshevik Revolution, there were many communists and leaders around the world that said that, the Bolsheviks should have just gotten elected. They shouldn't have had a revolution. And Lenin said, no. He said, pure democracy is only possible when you eliminate classes, when you create vast abundance. And until then, there's going to be dictatorship of some kind or other. And so you have to recognize that. And believing that our struggle is just trying to kind of tweak the Western democratic system to be more true to its principles, that's not what it's about, right? At the end of the day, it's about, striving to build a new world by having rational control of the means of production, et cetera. And that it's important to break with that kind of liberal Western thinking that yes, we know the West is not the democracy it claims to be, but our job is to not just try and make them true to that. Our job is to try and transform society. And that means in some cases being very authoritarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you just talked about the Tiananmen incident. Now, I was at the time, I supported that, as a young and naive person, I thought democracy is good, blah, blah. But now, after all these years looking back, first of all, I learned a little more about it, that it's absolutely the CIA was behind it. The student leaders there, they all got their US passport, green card very quickly once it's fall apart, right? And of course, their goal is just another color revolution. It just before all this color revolution happened, that's the goal, which is now in the hindsight, it's good that the Chinese government stopped it. Now, there's something they could do better so that not so many people getting killed. Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, it was so sudden. The Chinese government wasn't preparing for something like that. So they have
Well,
to act quickly, to stop this.
everything we've been told about that incident in the United States is wrong.
Yeah.
One of the most important things about it is that the students in the square were told they were fighting. We're told that they wanted Western democratic system. That's not true.
No.
Actually, one of the main factors, and again, this is something you can read this in the New York Times. Nicholas Kristof wrote about this in the lead up to it. One of the main factors motivating the students was racism. No one ever talks about that, but the Chinese government had scholarship programs for Black Africans to come there. And in the lead up to the Tiananmen incident, there were race riots happening all over Chinese college campuses because local Chinese people didn't like these Black men dating Chinese women. And the African students would have their houses burned down and all of that. Now, that doesn't fit the Western narrative, right? This was a racist mobilization, but that was a big factor. The other thing that doesn't fit the narrative is that according to a number of sources, there were more pictures of Mao Zedong in Tiananmen Square during those protests than there had ever been since the Cultural Revolution. And that a lot of the people, you had a lot that were motivated by racism. You also had people that thought that Deng Xiaoping was a sellout and they wanted to go back to the Gang of Four and they wanted to go, they were hardline Maoists. So it was, it was racists and hardline Maoists. This isn't a movement for Western democracy. But this is what color revolutions are. They're always vague, right? What's a color revolution about? It's about a color. It's about green, right? It can be about whatever you want, right? And the word democracy is in the Chinese constitution over and over and over again. Mao's revolution was called the New Democratic Revolution. The word democracy has many different connotations, and it was just a vague protest for democracy, whatever that means. And everyone who had any grievance assembled in the square to be there because they wanted democracy, whatever that means. And then there was an attempted coup by the military. There was a section of the military that tried to overthrow the Chinese government. And that's what color revolutions are. They create like a protest where all the cameras are, and then they use that to have a US aligned faction of the military take over the government. That's the color revolution playbook. And it failed because the bulk of the Chinese military from outside of Beijing was brought in and it was done. The other thing, though, is that there wasn't a massacre in the square, right?
Yeah.
And Nicholas Kristof has also talked about this. Many witnesses have said the students left the square peacefully. The killing happened elsewhere in the area around the square. And there were at least 200 Chinese soldiers who were killed. And there were snipers on rooftops killing Chinese soldiers. There were Chinese soldiers whose cars were being turned over. So if there's deaths on both sides, that's not a massacre, that's a battle. And so, yes, there was a lot of bloody unrest. Yes, a lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people who probably weren't doing anything wrong, were just caught in the crossfire or whatever, lost their lives. And it was a tragedy. But the narrative that we had, that the students were singing Kumbaya and peacefully protesting, and the Chinese government, murdered them in a tyrannical fit of rage, that's not what happened, right? That's just not what happened. And it's infuriating because that's been proven time and time again. WikiLeaks even, had diplomatic cables from Chile. The Pinochet government in Chile, sent a diplomatic cable saying that didn't happen. It's been proven over and over again. There was no massacre in Tiananmen Square. There was violence outside the square after the students peacefully dispersed. But yet they still repeat this. And, and if you say this, they just roll their eyes at you. But some things are true and some things are not. So there you go.
Yeah. The bulk of the fight is, as you said, the surrounding when the troops trying to get in. And I actually living in one of those rows. I was in my apartment, my parents' apartment. I was I was young. We were looking through the window. We could see the militaries, their cars and their also tanks. Everything was moving in. And where in front of me there was no killing because everybody left. But they were people put some buses, regular buses to try to stop them. And so the tanks just basically pushed through. And so there were buses that being pushed through and nobody get killed. That's where in front of me, that was I actually was the witness of that. So I can tell that in front of me, nobody was killed. All right. But I can imagine some other roads, if they're blockade and then there are people there protesting, when the military trying to go through, it could cause some real fight. I can see that. Yeah, that's yes. But for China, it's happened so quickly, and this is for them at the time was existential. So you can see why the Communist Party, the leader, has to act quickly, send in the troops, and when you do that so quickly, and the people still protesting, of course that caused some deaths on both sides. Yes, that's a real battle. Yes.
And also the context is important because they talk about it as if it was in China and they never tell you what was happening in Eastern Europe at the time. Because all over Eastern Europe, Romania, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, all these different places, they had a similar event, except it was successful. And what was the result? Mass impoverishment, sex trafficking, neoliberalism, people dying in mass, people fleeing. I mean, the 1990s, after these color revolutions were successful across Eastern Europe, was a disaster for the region. Some areas have not even recovered. And because the color revolution in Tiananmen Square failed, China has had the opposite. It's actually gotten much wealthier since then. So it's like, if you look at what happened all across Eastern Europe during 1989 and what that led to, you can say that a lot of people in China are very lucky that the Chinese Communist Party was able to stop what happened in Tiananmen Square in 89. And separating those events, which is something that the US media tries to do, is very deceptive because it was the same kind of operation, almost exactly. The students were there, they were protesting, wasn't clear what it was about. Sections of the military were trying to pull off a coup. It was the exact same playbook.
Yeah, you're totally right. When we look back at what happened in 1989, plenty of people, including me, was like, okay, I'm so glad that they crack it down, that they actually wasn't successful, the color revolution. Who knows? Because for one thing, even when I was there, my parents was pretty much prepared for a civil war even. I mean, imagine the civil war, right? What devastation for the regular people. Okay, civil war will definitely kill a lot of, regular people, definitely, right? And then they didn't stop there. They never, they never give up. So that's why they were trying to do in Hong Kong, 2019. Again, 2019, it just happened. I was there. I saw them. I saw how they harassed the local people. The local people literally call these people, the protesters, the so-called protesters, terrorists, because they are terrorizing the local communities. You don't get that report at all. You see, 2019 is when I started feeling this is so wrong. This whole Western narrative is so wrong because I saw it myself. The people in my hotel, they actually, as I was walking out to get my dinner, they stopped me in the lobby. They saying they are coming. And I was like, who are they? Turns out that the freedom fighter, those students, they were on the train and heading to my direction where there's a big park. So that's what they're going to do. And the locals, they're really nervous because these people, they come, they will burn down things. They will crack things. They do all kinds of violent things. And so the locals, they're knowing that they're heading here, they got really afraid. So they even stopped me from going out for my dinner. And I did. I just not doing anything. There were plenty of people in the lobby because they were trying to stop us from leaving. It was that bad. It was just totally terrorist activities. Of course, you don't hear that in the West.
Yeah, and that during the Hong Kong protests, the U.S. tech monopolies, I think it was Apple, created a cop killer app that would help the protesters who were murdering police officers find police, right? Can you imagine this, right? We talk about Russian meddling, Chinese meddling in American politics. Could you imagine if during the protests in Ferguson or the Black Lives Matter rebellion, the Chinese government had made a cop killer app to help protesters find where police were so they could kill them? That's what the American government did. You want to talk about meddling in somebody's politics? I mean, how many police officers died because the U.S. tech monopolies supplied these protesters with an app designed to help them kill the police? I mean, it's unbelievable.
That's when I totally turned. That's how my change. My idea, because before that I believed all the Western propaganda, I guess, more or less. Now, I think it's a gradual process. Ever since I left China, I started feeling, okay, this is not exactly what they said it is, but okay, no society is perfect. They're trying to get better, blah, blah. Kind of like finding excuses for myself to convince myself. But 2019 was like, no, this is just downright lying. And so that's interesting. Okay, I'm sorry to keep you. Once we start talking about this, I got angry. This is so angry to me that they would lie like this.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, and as someone who is of Chinese descent, it must be even more infuriating. I mean, it infuriates
Yeah.
me. and you were there, you saw it. So, I mean, in
It
both
just
times,
happened.
you saw it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just happened. I was there in Hong Kong, for some other activity, and then I was shocked that everything was burned down. They burned somebody alive just because that person's telling them don't be so violent, and they
Yeah.
poured the gasoline on him and lit him. They would do something like that, and the West is still supporting these kind of people. It just all right. Okay, so now you are in Moscow observing the election. So what are you going to do? You going to different polling places or?
That's the idea. I might be going to another region of Russia. I just found out. I assumed I was observing here in Moscow, but I just got to Moscow yesterday. I took a plane to Sochi, and I found out some of the people on our in that are observing the elections are actually going to Vladivostok. Some of them are going to St. Petersburg. Some of them are going to Donbass, to the new republics that just joined with Russia. So I don't know exactly where I'll be observing the elections. I just know that's what I'm here for, and then I'll be home after that. So I'm a little bit tired, but I'm glad to be here. I'm in a very nice hotel and I'm comfortable and I'm kind of recovering from everything. I'm going to stream again tonight, so that'll be good
Okay,
for
yeah.
the viewers. And I'm finishing my new book, right? I'm working on the textbook of the Center for Political Innovation. So, we have to have our new textbook out by the time we're having our National Educational Workshop at the end of April in Vermont. And so everyone who goes will get our new textbook. So I need to finish writing it. So most of it's finished and being laid out now, but I have 2 more chapters to finish. So I'm taking the time to work on that here, at the hotel, and that gives me the opportunity to do that. And we're very excited. Our organization this was a big win for our organization. I mean, we are anyone who really understands, internationally, who is respected, will understand that our group, the Center for Political Innovation, we are the anti-imperialists in America. There's a lot of people on social media being silly. A lot of rich kids on social media, wealthy kids who think it's like edgy to support the bad governments, and they're from wealthy backgrounds and they like to be social media influencers and they gossip about each other and whatever. But we're building a real organization of real people that are committed to these ideas. We have workshops, we have conferences, and that's very special. And that shows that we're serious on a level these people that are just screwing around are not, right? And so because of that, we have a lot of work to do. And I think it's really, really great. We got to talk with the Russian president. People should check out the video of that. And I hope people will come to our national workshop in Vermont because it's going to be very educational. And we've got a big summer ahead of us, the Democrat convention, the Republican convention, a lot of other things are happening. So there you go.
Yeah, you're very productive, right? I'm reading your book about the Houthis. Once I'm
Oh,
finished, I want to talk to you about that. And so, of course, if you have time before you leave Russia, if we can do another time just to tell us what's going on with the election there, that'll be great. And then when you're
sure.
back, we can talk about the Houthis. So there's so
Okay.
many things we can talk about. So thank you so much.
Sure. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for everything. And
Yeah,
I'm
great.
looking forward to be back in the United States, but got a week or so left here, and I'm going to make the most of it. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy your trip. It sounds so exciting. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, and
Thanks.
I hope all is well with you.
Mhm. Bye.
Bye bye.